without even intentionally realizing that we do it, we surround ourselves with people who think like us.
Yeah.
We surround ourselves with people who believe what we believe. We surround ourselves with people who have the same value as us. So then what the hell do you think is going to happen when you share your opinion or someone else shares their opinion? Everybody's going to confirm that that opinion is correct.
Yeah.
Even though it may not factually be correct.
Right.
It's just that as tribal creatures, as pack animals, we have created a pack around ourselves of people who think and feel and believe like us.
Yep.
And it's very, very hard to get out of that because it's even hard to become aware of that. I can almost guarantee you, my love, I can guarantee you that right now there are dozens of people who are shaking their heads up and down right now as they hear this conversation, and they're like, wow, that's true. My confirmation, my three best friends all think like me. My family all thinks like me. I do live in a small community where we all think the same and we have the same politics. I don't really have a lot of people who debate big issues with me. Like, I can see dozens of people shaking their heads. And the challenge is that as soon as we're done talking, as soon as today's conversation ends, something is going to refresh the brain, and they're going to forget that we had this confirmation bias conversation until maybe tonight or tomorrow, or that they share it with a friend, right? And that's what makes it so dangerous, is that even awareness of your confirmation bias isn't actually enough to fix it.
Right.
It's just the first step. It's almost like as soon as you gain the awareness, you have to jot down a note.
Yes.
You have to put a reminder in your phone. You have to put something on your calendar where it's like, hey, remember to look up confirmation bias. You know, hey, Siri, make a note. Hey, Siri, remind me at midnight, or remind me at 9 p.m. to research confirmation bias and how I can overcome it. Because it's so natural. It's just built into our human psyche.
Yeah, and I think confirmation bias is the most dangerous because, like you said, even if you're aware of it, you really have to make a conscious decision to take active steps to broaden your perspective, right? To be comfortable with the cognitive dissonance that will come with listening to other perspectives. And I think that, part of the danger too is that cognitive bias flows so well. Oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, it just feels right? Like, do you have, what's your evidence? And they'll be like, it just feels right? Like, doesn't it make sense to you? And no, none of those things, none of those answers are good enough, right? To say that something is true.
You know what else feels right? Like the first 15 minutes of drinking a beer feels right. It's not until an hour later and you're gassy that you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have had that third beer, right?
Yeah. Or it's like that first 10 minutes of shoveling ice cream into your face feels great. It totally feels right. You're like, I am bummed this is the right thing to do, until later on when you have to crash and you're like, that was not the right thing to do. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So we've got some really powerful stuff going on in the headlines right now, right? Israel-Hamas is a fantastic example of mere exposure.
Yeah.
The world is really afraid of what's going on in Israel right now.
Yeah.
When in reality, that's a long-term conflict that's been there for a long time that's really hyper-focused just in Israel. Hamas doesn't really operate outside of Israel. And the Israeli government is fighting Hamas, a proxy for Iran. It's a hot conflict, but it doesn't really affect us, right? That's a mere exposure thing. You see it everywhere, so you become afraid that it's going to somehow bleed over to the United States. When in reality, the highest probability is it's going to stay very localized in Israel. So right there's your mere exposure effect for sure.
Right, and you have to remember that the media that you're seeing, the news that you're seeing is country specific, right? So in the United States, we are seeing news and media about certain things that are deemed important to, the head of the news agencies and probably our government, right? And what's important to the government of the United States, to the politicians making the decisions at large, of a country are very specific to them, right? It's not like the news. If you go overseas, the news that you're going to see about any of these things in Japan, in Nigeria, in Saudi Arabia, it's all going to read very differently. And you can go online and look up, foreign news sources and start to see what are their top stories, right? Just to give you an idea.
But then, your example about the abortion change to the constitutional law in Ohio is a great example of confirmation bias, because you're going to have these people who want to believe something, and inside certain circles, they're going to want to believe that somehow changing a state law is going to impact a federal law.
Right.
Or they're going to want to believe that somehow, they're going to make an impact at a federal level. And that's an example of media taking advantage of confirmation bias. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.